H.P. Lovecraft has been the inspiration for many a genre, and with Forgive Me Father you're looking at a first-person shooter filled with blood and guts, and a system that relies upon your own madness. Will Forgive Me Father have you quaking with excitement, or are we about to illuminate a host of issues? Well, my name's Mark Walker, welcome back to SwitchUp. Now, let's find out. The story centres around Father Abraham, a man of the cloth, who has been summoned by his cousin Lewis, warned of a strange situation in the town of Pestisville. When you arrive, you find it's absolutely chock-a-block full of monsters and other creatures vying for your blood. On the same page, the journalist arc, who is also another playable character, follows Jane Smith, and she also has been contacted by her cousin Lewis, hoping to get her investigatory skills on the current case of flesh-eating demonic monsters. Both characters can find story items all throughout the world. They range from pictures on the wall to newspaper clippings and letters. It's nice to have this extra incentive, and at the end of a stage it will tell you exactly how many of those you found. Both of these characters will verbally narrate certain events that take place, expressing their horror, and this adds nicely to the atmosphere.
This place poisons my mind.
Gameplay wise, you are looking at an old school, air quotes, boomer shooter. It's like a mixture of Quake, Duke Nukem and Hexen, and it has a nice bit of depth. Both characters start with a trusty knife and a pistol. Headshots will gain you extra damage, but the knife isn't to be dismissed. It's actually very effective. Shortly after this, you'll pick up the age-old favourite, the double-barrel shotgun. Earlier enemies will march towards the player, while latter ones will try and evade you, ducking out of sight. But the goal remains the same: eliminate anything that moves and try not to get killed. Facilitating this goal are several environmental objects such as explosive barrels. As ammunition is slightly scarce, depending of course on the difficulty mode you've chosen, using these can save you a lot of trouble. Now straight away I have to say the first thing I look for in these games, especially on Switch, are gyroscopic motion controls, but they're not here, which is quite sad. Love them or hate them, for a lot of people in a first-person shooter, you only have to go and look at the comments to see it's a deal breaker. There are a number of different sensitivity options. You can change the XY axis, and you can increase the amount of auto aim if you so choose. Now each character has their own specific items. The priest obviously has a cross, which you can use to heal yourself, a lamp to light those dark areas, and some holy water, which you can sprinkle on enemies that will stun them for a short period of time. What's a little more unique though is that there's an entire skill tree system. And through this you can augment your character in a number of ways, such as putting points into a skill that will increase the amount of experience you gain. Obviously doing that nice and early is going to mean you level up much quicker, but perhaps a little more interestingly, you can actually customize some of your weapons. The pistol can be improved with accuracy, and the skill tree actually splits, so you have to make a choice which direction you want to go. Do you go super accurate fast shooting pistol or twin revolvers? It gives some replayability to it as well, and some of these customizations will completely change the way the weapon works. At its core though, it doesn't stray too far from its roots. It's all about the shooting. Once you've done enough of that, you'll be collecting up keys and of course looking for secret areas to gain armor. And I think that's the perfect time to talk about the madness system. Madness is tracked with a gauge shown in the bottom right of your screen, and it's also linked to replenishing your skills as the priest. As you kill enemies, filling the screen with blood and gore, or use certain items such as alcohol or drugs, a slightly unusual choice for the priest, or even dive into dark or dangerous areas, the amount of horror you're experiencing will increase, and in turn your madness. What that does is boost the priest's skills, replenishing the amount you can heal, use that holy water and your other abilities, but as the madness rises, it twists and warps your perspective. You might hear horrific noises. The screen will begin to grayscale, and it becomes increasingly more difficult to actually see what's going on. Plus you'll become vulnerable to more damage from certain enemies. In contrast to that though, you're also increasing your damage massively, and it's a system which by its design causes a frenetic shift in pace as the player builds up faster and faster, killing more enemies trying to maintain that, but then doesn't want to go too high as panic sets in and begins to slow down. It's a great reflection of H.P. Lovecraft's writings, where he often explored how these horrific situations that his protagonists were placed in would begin to target the strings of their sanity. Level design design deserves particular mention, particularly one section that sees you moving across the rooftops. There's a real change in pace and a certain claustrophobia as you realise you can no longer do huge strafes to evade an enemy, as this will send you toppling off the edge of a building. And at other times you're thrown into pitch darkness, the screams of the enemies filling the area and your eye catching the madness meter rising exponentially, with all the doors slamming shut and your own adrenal glands opening. Once you've beaten the game's levels, you'll probably be wanting to do the same with the other character, and each also includes a couple of different endings. Aside from the main story, there's also an endless mode. As the title suggests, it's a survival-like experience pitting you against waves and waves of enemies. There is no multiplayer option, which is a shame. I think with the two playable characters, split-screen co-op would have been perfect, and I do hope they add gyro down the line. I will also say that boss fight design is not the strongest aspect of this one. Gameplay scores 17 out of 20, and controls score 15 out of 20. Visually, things are looking pretty good on Switch. While it doesn't run at 60 frames per second, it seems to be locked at 30, and I haven't noticed any major performance issues at all, which is quite nice to be able to say. This artistic style doesn't rely too heavily on visual quality and resolution. In fact, those madness shifts can add in pixelation, and it's quite dark in some areas. There are a couple of nice effects in here, like the shallow depth of field when an enemy gets too close. Most of the props can be destroyed, but the star of the show are those sprite-like enemies as they explode in a shower of claret. Once again, text size is an issue though if you're playing in handheld mode, especially on some of those newspaper articles and clippings you'll pick up. Sound and audio, as I'm sure you've heard already, are fantastic. From the crunchy sounds of the double-barrel shotgun to the main protagonist reeling off one-liners. Even though I will say some of those lines get a little repetitious by the end of the game. And then the metal soundtrack kicking in as all hell breaks loose. Then in a more nuanced way as your madness meter creeps up. And if you've got a set of headphones on in handheld mode, you'll begin to hear the whispers behind you, or the strange moanings coming from around the corner. And the whole thing is running at 30 frames per second. I would have liked 60. Visuals and performance score 16 out of 20. Sound and audio score 17 out of 20. Forgive Me Father will cost you £19.99 physically, or your regional equivalent, and hopefully I've managed to find a digital price and I'll put that on the screen now. It releases on the Switch on the eShop on the 28th of September, with the physical following around about a month later. You can expect around 8 hours for your first playthrough, with a good and bad ending to achieve, and obviously both characters, as well as the endless mode to come back for, and the new game plus, which is unlocked after you complete the game once, and introduces some new items, more difficult enemies, and lets you restart with some of the things you left off with. I think it's offering decent value, and then you've got a physical thrown in there as well. I sincerely hope the developer watched this review and add in gyroscopic controls. It would be the icing on the cake. I think the value is here. Certainly with multiplayer, it will be right up there with some of my favourites on Switch, but as it stands, it's still solid at 16 out of 20. Well, it turns out this one doesn't need a great deal of forgiveness. It offers an enjoyable retro experience with a few little twists. Some of the skill trees aren't as balanced as I would have liked, and the bosses, well, they're a bit of a pain. But first-person shooter fans, you are going to enjoy this one for sure. It gets a SwitchUp score of 81%. Is this one you've been interested in? Let me know in the comments. As always, you can save yourself 10% on any of your eShop credit using code SwitchUp over at switchup.gg. Thanks to our Patreons, our members, all of you that enjoy the content. And as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!